Picture this moment. Someone you care about is trying to have a difficult conversation with you. They're upset, maybe hurt. They're looking at you, waiting for a response, and you feel nothing. Not anger, not sadness, not even discomfort. Just a strange, hollow emptiness. Like someone turned off the lights inside you. Your face goes blank, your mind goes quiet, and somewhere deep down a small voice is screaming, "Why can't I feel anything right now?" This isn't about being cold. It isn't about not caring. This is your nervous system making a choice for you. A choice that was programmed long before this moment, and understanding why this happens is the first step to changing it. Emotional shutdown is your brain's emergency protocol. It's what happens when your nervous system decides that feeling is too dangerous. Here's what it looks like from the outside. Someone becomes very still, their face goes flat, their voice might become monotone, or they might stop speaking altogether. They seem distant, disconnected, like they've left the room even though their body is still there. But from the inside, it's different. There's often a sense of watching yourself from a distance. You know you should be feeling something, but there's just numbness, like someone wrapped your emotions in cotton wool. Some people describe it as feeling underwater. Others say it's like watching their life through a television screen. You might notice your thoughts becoming very logical, very practical, detached observations rather than felt experiences. They're upset. I should respond. What would be the appropriate thing to say here? But the words feel scripted, mechanical, because the emotional part of you has gone offline. This isn't a choice. That's crucial to understand. When people shut down emotionally, they're not deciding to be difficult or distant. Their nervous system is initiating a protective response that happens automatically, beneath conscious awareness. To understand emotional shutdown, we need to understand how your nervous system responds to threat. And for that, we turn to the work of Dr. Stephen Porges and his Polyvagal Theory. Porges identified 3 distinct nervous system states, each with its own evolutionary purpose. First is the social engagement system, your ventral vagal state. This is where you feel safe, connected, able to think clearly and engage with others. Your face is animated, your voice has prosody, musicality. You can be present. When threat appears, you move into sympathetic activation. This is fight or flight. Your heart rate increases. Stress hormones flood your system. You become hypervigilant, scanning for danger. Energy mobilizes for action. This is the nervous system preparing to either confront the threat or escape from it. But here's what most people don't realize. There's a third response. When the nervous system determines that fighting won't work and fleeing isn't possible, it shifts into a much older survival mechanism, dorsal vagal shutdown. This is the freeze response, and it's where emotional shutdown lives. In this state, your heart rate actually decreases, your metabolism slows, blood flow to the extremities reduces, you become very still, very quiet. In nature, this is the last-ditch survival strategy of prey animals that can't fight and can't run. Play dead, become invisible, wait for the threat to pass. For humans, this manifests as emotional numbing, dissociation, that sense of watching your life from behind glass. Your thinking becomes foggy, time might feel distorted, and most significantly, your access to emotion gets cut off. The brilliant insight of polyvagal theory is this. These aren't conscious choices, they're autonomic responses happening beneath the level of awareness. Your nervous system is constantly assessing safety and danger, what Porges calls neuroception. And when it detects threat, particularly relational threat, particularly in situations where you feel trapped or overwhelmed, it can shift into shutdown without your permission. So why do some people's nervous systems choose shutdown while others fight or flee? The answer lies in early developmental experiences and what patterns got wired into your biology. As children, we learn what's safe and what's dangerous through our relationships with caregivers. We learn whether our emotions are welcome or threatening, whether expressing need brings comfort or rejection, whether vulnerability creates connection or abandonment. When a child's emotions consistently overwhelm their caregivers, or worse, trigger punishment or withdrawal, something profound happens. The child's nervous system learns that feeling is dangerous, not just uncomfortable, but actively threatening to their survival. Think about a young child who gets very upset and the parent responds with anger. Stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about. Or the parent who becomes cold and distant when the child expresses need. You're being too sensitive, you're being dramatic. Or perhaps most insidiously, the parent who becomes emotionally dysregulated themselves when the child is upset, collapsing into their own distress, leaving the child to regulate both their own emotions and their parents'. What does the child's nervous system learn from these experiences? It learns that emotions are dangerous. That feeling creates threat rather than resolving it. That shutdown is safer than expression. This is what developmental psychologists call affect dysregulation. The child doesn't develop the capacity to modulate their emotional experience because their emotions weren't met with co-regulation. Instead, they were met with rejection, punishment, or overwhelming reciprocal dysregulation. So the child learns to cut themselves off from feeling, not consciously, not as a deliberate strategy, but as an automatic nervous system adaptation. Shutdown becomes the default response to emotional intensity. And here's what makes this particularly tragic. This adaptation is brilliant in childhood. It works. If expressing emotion brings punishment or abandonment, then not feeling protects the child from that pain. The problem is, this pattern gets carried forward into adult life long after the original threat has passed. Attachment theory, first developed by John Bowlby and later expanded by Mary Ainsworth, gives us another lens for understanding shutdown patterns. Secure attachment develops when a child's emotional expressions are consistently met with attuned, responsive caregiving. The child cries, the parent responds with comfort. The child feels fear, the parent provides safety. The child experiences joy, the parent reflects and amplifies that joy. Through thousands of these micro-interactions, the child's nervous system learns, my emotions are manageable. When I feel something overwhelming, help is available. I don't have to face difficult feelings alone. But when attachment is disrupted, insecure patterns develop. And one particular pattern is strongly associated with emotional shutdown: avoidant attachment. Children who develop avoidant attachment often had caregivers who were emotionally unavailable or actively dismissive of emotional expression. Perhaps the parent was depressed, preoccupied, or simply uncomfortable with emotion. Perhaps they valued independence and self-sufficiency above emotional connection. These children learn to deactivate their attachment system. They learn that seeking comfort doesn't work, so they stop seeking it. They learn that expressing emotion doesn't bring the parent closer, so they stop expressing it. They become what researchers call self-sufficient, but it's a false self-sufficiency built on suppression rather than genuine autonomy. And here's the mechanism that's crucial to understand. These children learn to shut down their emotional experience before it becomes conscious. They don't feel the need and then suppress it. They cut off access to the feeling itself. The shutdown happens at such a deep level that they genuinely don't register their own emotional experience. As adults, people with this attachment pattern often describe themselves as not very emotional or pretty even-keeled. They might take pride in their ability to stay calm under pressure, to not get caught up in drama, and there's genuine adaptation there. But beneath that calm is often a nervous system that's in chronic shutdown, constantly working to keep threatening emotions below the surface of awareness. Psychiatrist Dan Siegel introduced a concept that's essential for understanding emotional shutdown: the window of tolerance. Imagine your nervous system has an optimal zone where you can process emotions effectively. You feel things, but you're not overwhelmed by them. You can think clearly while also being emotionally present. This is your window of tolerance. When something pushes you outside this window, you go in one of two directions. You might go up into hyperarousal, anxiety, panic, rage, feeling too much too intensely, or you might go down into hypoarousal, shutdown, numbness, dissociation, feeling nothing at all. People who shut down emotionally have developed a very narrow window of tolerance. It doesn't take much emotional intensity to push them out of their optimal zone and into hypoarousal, a difficult conversation, a moment of conflict. Sometimes even positive emotions like excitement or joy can trigger shutdown. And here's what makes this challenging. The narrower your window of tolerance becomes, the more you rely on shutdown to manage your emotional experience. It becomes a self-reinforcing cycle. You shut down to avoid feeling overwhelmed. But because you shut down, you never develop the capacity to tolerate and process difficult emotions. So your window stays narrow, and shutdown remains necessary. This is why people often describe emotional shutdown as automatic and immediate. One moment they're in a conversation, the next moment they're gone. They crossed the edge of their window of tolerance and their nervous system initiated shutdown before they even registered what was happening. Let's look at how emotional shutdown actually shows up in daily life, because it's rarely as dramatic as someone collapsing or becoming catatonic. Often it's subtle, hidden. Even the person experiencing it might not recognize it as shutdown. In romantic relationships, shutdown often emerges during conflict. Your partner expresses hurt or disappointment. They want to talk about something that's bothering them, and you feel yourself getting very calm, almost too calm. You become logical, analytical. You might start problem solving, offering rational explanations. Your voice becomes flat, measured. Meanwhile, your partner is becoming more upset, perhaps feeling unheard or dismissed. You're not even listening to me, but you are listening. You're tracking every word. You're just not emotionally present with what they're saying. The content is registering, but the emotional significance isn't penetrating. Or perhaps you simply go quiet. You stop responding. Not out of anger or manipulation, but because there's nothing to say. The words just aren't there. Your mind goes blank. You stare at a spot on the wall and wait for the conversation to be over. In work environments, shutdown might look like emotional flatness during high-pressure situations. Everyone else is stressed, activated, expressing frustration or excitement. You're just steady. People might describe you as calm under pressure, and maybe you are. But beneath that calm is often a nervous system that's protecting itself by cutting off emotional access. With friends, shutdown might manifest as difficulty being present during emotional conversations. Someone shares something vulnerable, something painful. They might cry, and you find yourself becoming uncomfortable, wanting to change the subject, offering advice to fix the problem rather than simply being with them in their distress. Or you might notice shutdown in physical sensation. Your body becomes very still. Your breathing becomes shallow. Your chest feels tight or heavy, like there's a weight pressing down. Some people describe their body as feeling dead, numb, like their limbs don't quite belong to them. There's often a cognitive component too. Your thinking becomes very concrete, very literal. Metaphor and nuance become difficult to access. You struggle to identify what you're feeling because the feeling itself has been dampened. When someone asks, "What are you feeling right now?" you genuinely don't know. Not because you don't want to share, but because there's nothing there to share. Here's what makes emotional shutdown particularly insidious. It works. In the moment, it reduces distress. It makes overwhelming situations manageable. It keeps you functional when emotion would derail you. But this short-term adaptation comes with profound long-term costs. First, shutdown prevents the processing and integration of emotional experiences. When you cut off access to feeling, you don't work through difficult emotions. You just store them. The hurt, the anger, the grief, it all gets compressed and filed away in your nervous system, unprocessed and unresolved. Over time, this creates what trauma therapist Peter Levine calls bound energy in the body. Your nervous system is holding these unprocessed experiences in a state of suspended activation, constantly working to keep them from surfacing. This requires enormous energy. It's exhausting. Many people who chronically shut down describe feeling perpetually tired, even when they're getting adequate sleep. That's because their nervous system is working around the clock to maintain the shutdown. It's like running a program in the background of your computer that's constantly consuming resources. Second, shutdown prevents intimacy. Real connection requires emotional presence. It requires the capacity to feel what you feel and allow yourself to be seen in that feeling. When you're shut down, you might be physically present, but emotionally, you're absent, and people feel that absence. They experience it as distance, as unavailability, even if you're saying all the right words. This creates a painful paradox. People shut down to protect themselves in relationships, but the shutdown itself prevents the very connection they're seeking. Partners feel lonely, friends feel like they can't really reach you, and you feel isolated, even in the company of others. Third, chronic shutdown disconnects you from your own inner life. You lose access to the signals your emotions provide about what you need, what matters to you, what aligns with your values. Emotions aren't just random feelings to be managed. They're information. They tell you when something isn't right, when a boundary has been crossed, when you need to make a change. When you're chronically shut down, you lose access to this internal guidance system. You might find yourself in situations that are harmful or misaligned with your needs, but you don't feel the warning signals that would typically prompt you to leave. You become disconnected from your own inner wisdom. Fourth, shutdown can manifest as physical symptoms. Your body keeps the score, as trauma researcher Bessel van der Kolk famously noted. The emotions you're not feeling don't just disappear, they get somatized, expressed through your body instead of your consciousness. Chronic pain, digestive issues, tension headaches, fatigue. These can all be manifestations of shutdown, your body holding what your mind won't let you feel. Medical interventions might provide temporary relief, but until the underlying emotional suppression is addressed, the symptoms often persist or migrate to new areas. If emotional shutdown is causing so many problems, why is it so difficult to change? Why can't people just decide to stop shutting down and start feeling? The answer lies in the fact that shutdown is a survival mechanism, not a choice. Your nervous system isn't making a mistake when it initiates shutdown. It's protecting you based on very old information about what's dangerous. Remember, these patterns were formed when you were young, when your nervous system was learning what's safe and what's threatening. At that time, feeling was genuinely dangerous. It brought punishment, abandonment, or overwhelming dysregulation. Shutdown was the intelligent adaptation. The problem is, your nervous system doesn't automatically update when your circumstances change. That childhood learning is stored implicitly beneath conscious awareness in the deepest structures of your brain. It's not held as a memory you can recall and rationally evaluate. It's held as a procedural response, like how to ride a bike. Automatic, immediate, non-negotiable. So when you're in a situation that resembles that original threat, even superficially, your nervous system initiates the same protective response. A difficult conversation with your partner triggers the same shutdown that protected you when your parent got angry. Your boss expressing disappointment activates the same freeze response that helped you survive parental criticism. And here's what makes this particularly challenging. The shutdown itself prevents you from having new corrective experiences. To learn that feeling is safe now, you would need to feel in the presence of safety. But your nervous system won't let you feel because it's still operating from the assumption that feeling is dangerous. You're caught in a bind. This is why simply understanding shutdown isn't enough to change it. You can read about Polyvagal Theory, learn about attachment, understand the neuroscience perfectly. But knowing why you shut down doesn't automatically give your nervous system permission to stop shutting down. Change requires something different. It requires actually experiencing safety at the nervous system level, not just cognitively understanding it. It requires gradually expanding your window of tolerance so you can tolerate feeling without being overwhelmed. It requires learning slowly and carefully that emotions can be felt and survived. We need to talk about dissociation because it's often the mechanism through which shutdown operates. Dissociation is your mind's ability to disconnect from present experience. At its most basic, it's a normal phenomenon. When you're driving and suddenly realize you don't remember the last 5 minutes of the journey, that's mild dissociation. Your mind wandered while your procedural memory kept you driving safely. But for people with chronic shutdown patterns, dissociation becomes more pervasive and automatic. It's the primary tool the nervous system uses to manage overwhelming emotional experiences. There are different types of dissociation, and understanding them helps clarify what's happening during emotional shutdown. Emotional numbing is the most obvious form. This is when you cut off access to emotional experience while remaining cognitively present. You can think, analyze, problem solve, but you can't feel. It's like someone put a pane of glass between you and your emotional experience. Depersonalization is when you feel disconnected from yourself. You might look at your hands and feel like they don't quite belong to you. Or you hear yourself speaking and it sounds like someone else's voice. There's a strange sense of being outside yourself, watching your life happen rather than living it. Derealization is when the world around you feels unreal. Colors might seem muted. Sounds might be distant. Everything has a dreamlike quality, like you're moving through a movie set rather than actual reality. In more severe dissociation, there can be memory gaps. You might lose track of time or not remember portions of conversations or events. This isn't the same as simply forgetting. It's more like those experiences never fully entered conscious awareness in the first place. For people who experience trauma or severe emotional neglect in childhood, dissociation became a crucial survival tool. When the environment was overwhelming and there was no escape, the mind created an internal escape. If you can't leave the situation physically, you leave it mentally. The challenge is that dissociation, like shutdown, becomes automatic. Your nervous system learns to initiate it as soon as intensity appears. So even in safe situations now, even in relationships where vulnerability would actually deepen connection, the dissociative shutdown happens automatically before you can choose otherwise. So how do you begin to change patterns that are this deep, this automatic, this rooted in survival? The answer isn't to force yourself to feel or to simply stop shutting down. Remember, shutdown is protective. Your nervous system is doing this for a reason, even if that reason is based on outdated information. Change begins with learning to regulate your nervous system in new ways. This is called co-regulation in therapeutic contexts, but the principles extend beyond therapy. First, you need to begin recognizing when you're approaching the edge of your window of tolerance before full shutdown occurs. This requires developing what's called interoceptive awareness, the ability to notice your internal state. What does it feel like when you start to approach shutdown? For many people, there are subtle early warning signs. Your breathing might become shallow, your chest might feel tight, your thoughts might start to feel slightly foggy or distant. You might notice yourself becoming very still. Learning to recognize these early signs gives you a window of opportunity. Before full shutdown occurs, you can engage in practices that help your nervous system stay in your window of tolerance. These aren't cognitive interventions. You can't think your way out of shutdown. The nervous system operates beneath thought, so the interventions need to be somatic, working directly with your body. Breath work is one of the most accessible tools. Slow, deep breathing, particularly emphasizing a long exhale, activates your parasympathetic nervous system, not the dorsal vagal shutdown branch, but the ventral vagal social engagement branch. This can help you stay regulated without going into freeze. Physical movement can also help discharge activation before it overwhelms your window of tolerance. This might be as simple as standing up, stretching, shaking out your arms. Remember, your body naturally wants to complete the stress cycle. When you interrupt shutdown by gently moving, you're giving your nervous system an alternative pathway. Grounding techniques help you stay present in your body, feeling your feet on the floor, noticing the weight of your body in the chair, touching something with texture, and really focusing on the sensation. These practices anchor you in present moment physical experience, which can prevent the dissociative drift into shutdown. But here's what's crucial. These techniques are most effective when practiced regularly, not just in moments of crisis. Your nervous system needs repetition to learn new patterns. Practicing regulation when you're calm builds capacity that becomes available when you're stressed. Nervous system patterns were formed in relationship, and they heal in relationship. This is one of the fundamental insights of interpersonal neurobiology. You learn to shut down because emotional expression wasn't safe in early relationships. To unlearn shutdown, you need experiences of safety in relationship. You need to experience, at a nervous system level, that feeling is possible without threat. That vulnerability can coexist with security. This is why therapy can be so effective for shutdown patterns, particularly trauma-informed therapy or approaches like somatic experiencing. A skilled therapist provides what's called a regulating presence. Their nervous system, staying calm and present while you approach difficult emotions, helps regulate your nervous system. This isn't about talking through problems or gaining insight, though those might happen too. It's about your nervous system having the experience of being with someone else while feeling and discovering that it's survivable. That the other person doesn't become dysregulated, doesn't punish or abandon you, just stays present. Over time, through repeated experiences of safe co-regulation, your window of tolerance begins to expand. What previously would have triggered immediate shutdown can now be felt, held, processed, not because you forced yourself to feel, but because your nervous system learned through direct experience that feeling is no longer dangerous. But therapy isn't the only place this can happen. Any relationship characterized by consistent safety and attunement can provide co-regulating experiences. A partner who can stay calm and present when you're upset. A friend who doesn't need you to perform emotional stability. A support group where vulnerability is met with compassion rather than judgment. The key is consistency. Your nervous system needs repetition to update its threat detection. One experience of safety doesn't override years of learning that feeling is dangerous, but many experiences accumulated over time can slowly rewire those deep patterns. As you work with shutdown patterns, the goal isn't to never shut down again. That's not realistic. Your nervous system will continue to protect you when overwhelm happens. The goal is to expand your window of tolerance so that you can tolerate more emotional intensity before shutdown occurs. And when shutdown does happen, to recover from it more quickly. This expansion happens gradually through what's called titration in trauma therapy. You approach difficult emotions in small, manageable doses, not all at once. Not overwhelming yourself in the name of facing your feelings. That would just reinforce your nervous system's belief that feeling is dangerous. Instead, you practice what therapist Babette Rothschild calls moving toward the difficult, moving away before overwhelm. You might notice anger starting to surface. You stay with it for a moment, feeling it in your body. Then, before it becomes overwhelming, you deliberately engage in something regulating. You've just expanded your capacity slightly. Over time, these small exposures add up. Your nervous system learns. I can feel anger for 30 seconds without shutting down. I can tolerate sadness for a minute without dissociating. The window slowly grows wider. Physical practices that increase body awareness can support this process. Yoga, particularly trauma-informed yoga, helps you develop the capacity to notice sensation in your body without becoming overwhelmed by it. Martial arts can teach you to stay present and grounded while experiencing intensity. Mindfulness meditation, when practiced carefully, can also help expand your window of tolerance. But this requires caution for people with shutdown patterns. Traditional meditation instructions to observe your thoughts and feelings without judgment can sometimes trigger dissociation if not adapted properly. Working with a teacher who understands trauma is important. The key across all these practices is the same: gradual exposure to intensity within the context of safety, building your capacity to feel without overwhelming your nervous system's ability to regulate. As people begin to emerge from chronic shutdown, they often encounter something unexpected and painful: grief. When you shut down emotionally in childhood, you didn't just protect yourself from difficult feelings, you also lost access to your full emotional range. Joy became muted, excitement became suspect, connection became scary. You lost years, sometimes decades, of emotional richness. And as your window of tolerance expands, as you begin to feel again, you might find yourself grieving what you missed, the relationships that could have been deeper if you'd been more present, the experiences you couldn't fully enjoy because you were shut down. The younger version of yourself who learned that feeling wasn't safe. This grief is legitimate. It deserves to be acknowledged. You did lose something precious, not through any fault of your own, but through the adaptive strategy your nervous system needed for survival. And here's what's important. This grief, painful as it is also a sign of healing. You can only grieve what you're no longer doing. The fact that you can recognize what was lost means you're beginning to access what's possible now. The invitation is to hold both truths simultaneously. Yes, shutdown was protective and necessary, and yes, it came at a cost. You can honour the adaptation that kept you safe while also grieving what it prevented. Both things can be true at once. Emotional shutdown is not a character flaw. It's not evidence that you're broken or cold or incapable of feeling. It's evidence that your nervous system is doing exactly what it learned to do to keep you safe. And here's what that means. If it was learned, it can be unlearned. Not erased, because those early patterns will always be part of your neural architecture, but they can be updated. New patterns can be built alongside the old ones. Your window of tolerance can expand. Your capacity to feel without overwhelming can grow. This doesn't happen quickly. Patterns that took years to form take time to change. Your nervous system needs repetition, consistency, safety. It needs evidence, not just ideas. It needs to experience directly and repeatedly that feeling is survivable now, but it is possible. People who spent decades shut down can learn to feel again. People who couldn't access emotion can develop rich inner lives. People who dissociated automatically can learn to stay present, not perfectly, not without effort, but genuinely. The path forward isn't about forcing yourself to feel. It's about creating conditions where feeling becomes safe enough that your nervous system can risk it. It's about finding relationships where your emotions are welcome. It's about practices that help you stay in your window of tolerance. It's about gradually, carefully expanding your capacity to be present with your own experience. You didn't choose to shut down. Your nervous system made that choice for you when you were young and vulnerable and overwhelmed. But now, as an adult, you can participate in that choice. You can begin to notice when shutdown is happening. You can practice staying present a little longer. You can seek out relationships and experiences that support your emergence. Coming back to life after years of shutdown is both simple and profound. Simple because it's just about learning to feel again, something you were born knowing how to do. Profound because it means reclaiming a part of yourself you may have lost access to long ago. Your emotions are not your enemy. They're not dangerous, even though your nervous system learned they were. They're information, they're colour, they're the full spectrum of what it means to be human. And you deserve access to that full spectrum, not just the safe, muted versions, all of it. The joy and the grief, the anger and the tenderness, the whole messy, beautiful range of human feeling. The question isn't whether your nervous system will ever let you feel again. It will, given the right conditions. The question is whether you're willing to create those conditions, whether you're willing to move slowly, carefully, patiently towards something your body learned long ago was dangerous. Because on the other side of that risk is something precious, presence, connection, the felt sense of being alive in your own life, not observing it from behind glass, not managing it from a distance, but actually being here, feeling it, living it. That's what's possible, not immediately, not without effort, but eventually with patience and support and the slow, steady work of nervous system healing. You shut down to survive. Now you can learn to feel, to truly live.